In this tutorial, I will be covering setting up your grade center based on total points. So the first thing you want to do after accessing your full grade center, and to access the full grade center, you're going to click on Grade Center and it's going to expand the menu, then click on Full Grade Center. You can also click directly on this arrow pointing to the right and that will take you to the full grade center as well. So once you're on this full grade center page, the first thing you're going to want to do is actually delete this weighted total column. This will help cut down on confusion for students. So you'll click on that down arrow and you'll go ahead and click delete column. And yes, you want to go ahead and delete it. So now we've got everything set up for our total column. So the second thing you want to do is go into the learning units and add any tests or assignments that you're going to be using throughout the term. So once you've got all of your tests created and all of your assignment links, then it will automatically create these columns. Then once you have all of the columns for the assignments that are located within Blackboard, that Blackboard automatically creates those columns, you're going to want to create any manual columns. So if you need a participation column, or if there's some kind of assignment that students are doing, like if you're doing clinical and you're going to give them a manual grade, what you would do is you would click on this create column. You're going to change your primary display over to percentage, and then you can put it out of 100 points, and then you can go ahead and just click submit. Now, if this was a column, a manual column that you were going to create for an assignment that had a due date, go ahead and put that due date in there. This will allow students to follow the Blackboard calendar so they can keep up with when assignments are due. So in this instance, since this is actually participation and I'm not going to give this grade to students to actually turn something in, it would be an ongoing grade, then I'm just going to go ahead and click submit. And now I've got my participation column. You can also create multiple columns at one time by hovering over Manage and going to Batch Create Grade Columns. So if I needed to create 10 different columns, for instance, I'm going to be creating quizzes that students will take in class, then I'll go ahead and put 10 for my number of columns. I'll click Submit, and then I would name my columns. Then what I would do is I'm going to change the primary display to percentage. And then if I had a category, I would put them in category now. And then I could do my points possible. And I want to do that out of a 100 because I've got my primary display set to percentage. And then I would have my due date. And then you would just click submit, and that would go ahead and create all of those columns at one time. But since I'm not actually going to be batch creating any columns, I'm going to cancel out of that. And you can also batch delete grade columns. So if you're going through the course and you're deleting tests or assignments that you're no longer needing, but it still leaves the actual column in the grade center, what you can do is you can hover over Manage and click on Batch Delete Grade Columns. Now, the good thing about the Batch Delete Grade Columns is anything that's still attached to an assignment in your learning units will not display here. So you don't have to worry about deleting an assignment that's still located in the course. However, if you've created a manual column, then that will be listed here because it's not attached to anything. So just be careful whenever you're deleting your grade columns. Then what you'll want to do is determine whether or not you want to use all of the columns in the Grade Center, or if you want to set your Grade Center up based on selected columns, or you can also select categories. So if you want to set your Grade Center up and you still want the total points, you can actually create categories and have it just pull the categories. So if I need a category for my participation, what I would do is I would hover over Manage, and then I'm going to go to Categories. So you'll notice that there are default categories. This final exam is a manual column or a manual category that I created. And it can actually be deleted if you don't need it. Be careful if you have duplicate columns, or I mean categories. Yeah, be careful if you have duplicate categories. You want to delete any category that you're not using that was manually created. Now you'll notice like I can't delete this assignment or the blog. Because those categories were created by Blackboard automatically. But say for instance I need to add a participation category. So what I would do is I would click Create Category. I'm going to name it Participation. And then I'm going to go ahead and click Submit. And say I want to go ahead and create a category for quizzes. And then I've already got my final exam, and I've already got my assignment, and it looks good. I don't think I want to add any more categories. Now, if you're just going to pull all of the category or all of the columns that are located in the Grade Center, you don't have to worry about creating any kind of categories. But this is just for if you decide you want to do that. If you have a lot of columns, say for instance you're using a third party that syncs over to Blackboard and they have 50 different assignments, that is when I would recommend using categories for your total column, and I'm going to show you why. So now that we've actually got our categories created, what we want to do is we want to go into our column organization, and we want to verify that our categories are correct. Now for our syllabus quiz, we actually want to set that to be no category. And then our discussion is correct. For the Chapter 1 quiz and the Chapter 2 quiz, I'm going to go ahead and put those under the quizzes. And then I'm going to go ahead and leave my Chapter 1 review and my Getting Started quiz and then the syllabus and Start Here. I'm going to go ahead and leave those as tests. But for my participation, I'm going to want to go ahead and select the participation category that I created. So then once I've got all of my categories correct, I'm going to click Submit. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over my total, and I'm going to click on this down arrow, and I'm going to go to Edit Column Information. So the syllabus quiz should not be included in your columns, and the weighted total column should not, the work ethics column should not be included in your columns. But if I've decided that I've got a lot of columns and I would rather individually select my columns, I can do that under the columns to select. Or like I said, if I have so many columns, it might be easier to go ahead and select by categories. And you can select multiple categories by holding the control button, and then that will allow you to select multiple. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click my caret and move those to the right under selected columns. And from here, I can also, if I want to drop grades or use the highest grade to calculate, I can do that as well. But I'm actually not going to do that. I'm just going to leave the selected categories alone. You always want to set the running total to yes. Then once you're going through the term, you'll want to assign zeros for any assignments that the students have missed that you're not going to allow them to make up. So make sure that you're doing that throughout the term, because when you go to submit your midterm grades, those students are not going to know where they stand in the course if you don't assign zeros. So it's really important when you set when you set up your calculated column, whether it's a total or a weighted total, you always want the running total set to yes. Then under the options where it says include this column in the Grade Center calculations, go ahead and click no, and then leave the other two settings alone, and then you're just going to click submit. And now your total column is set up. So now once you go to submit your ILP grades, everything's going to be set up correctly. And also you want to make sure that your total column has the external grade on there. So what you'll do is you'll click on this down arrow. If you don't see set as external grade, that's going to tell you, well, and you see the total column selected, you've got your external green check mark. That also tells you whether or not it's set to the external grade. But say, for instance, you've got it set to a different column, like the syllabus quiz, it's really important that you change that back to the total, because when you go to submit your your grades for the sync from Blackboard to Banner, whatever column is set with this green check mark is what is submitted to Banner. So it is very important that you make sure that your total column has that set as external grade. Once it has that check mark on there, you no longer have the option to set it as the external grade. That option actually disappears because it's already designated. And that's all you would do to set up your Grade Center.